So it looks from the way I can see it that Pete Buttigieg, if nominated, would probably beat Trump in all likelihood. This guy seemed pretty boring at first glance, and I don't think he has any chance of swinging the nomination. But if he were, looking at the way he talks, he's very threatening to Trump and is easily the biggest threat to him running on the Democratic side. I took notice of the guy earlier this morning because I saw a story about him having to apologize to Hillary Clinton for calling her out her bad 2016 campaign. Now, apparently he critiqued her strategy of going after and just sort of endorsing the status quo and saying that, you know, the whole America's already great line of thinking, that was just completely alienated a lot of the Midwestern people, which is 100% true. And I guess it's understandable that this guy would know that, considering he's the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. But of course, you're not allowed to criticize Hillary, so he had to back down from that statement, right? At least that's what the headline said. Now, when I went and actually read the story, he did not back down at all. He said, sure, I have great respect for Secretary Clinton, but that was a terrible campaign and it would have never won. Now, that to me is pretty significant because he spoke his mind and then actually stood up for it. Now, this is on campaign strategy. It's not on any, real political ideas, but that's all we're talking about here is winning and losing. I don't really care about what his ideas are for the sake of this video. Kind of like Bernie, Pete, I'll just call him Pete because his last name is hard to say. Pete recognizes a lot of the same problems that Trump does, which again was sort of Bernie's advantage in 2016, and why I think he would have been a much better candidate than Hillary. But Bernie recognizes these problems and then says, and that's why we need, full communism, or I guess he's down to Swedish social democracy. But this Pete guy, he doesn't come across as a commie, crazy old man like Bernie. He comes across as a nice, fresh face, very middle of the road and kind of likable, normal guy. He's very much a Midwestern candidate, and in order for Trump to win re-election, he's going to have to sweep all the Midwestern states. Trump needs not only Pennsylvania, but Ohio, Indiana, which I think Trump will still win even against this Pete guy who's from Indiana, Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan, and Wisconsin. And Trump barely won Michigan. People forget that, and Wisconsin. It was pretty close. Trump did not have a landslide victory in all those important states. He won by slim margins, and frankly, that's only because Hillary was an awful candidate. If you put someone in there like this Pete guy, who is not only from the Midwest, or who's not only not a terrible candidate, but is from the Midwest and can appeal directly to these people, and has a at least a track record of saying things that are similar to what they believe, I think Trump's going to get blown out in the Midwestern states and probably lose. Except for maybe in Ohio. Is getting to be pretty red, with all of the lefties leaving and trying to flood to the coasts from Ohio. I think Ohio is certainly still gettable for Trump. But Michigan and Wisconsin, I think, are pretty much no chance if this Pete guy were to be nominated. Trump could not win Michigan or Wisconsin. And without those two states, he's not going to win. And, the same thing's true of Pennsylvania. I don't think Trump would win Pennsylvania again. But thankfully, for Trump's sake, this guy will not be nominated because he's too white, too male, and not gay enough, to paraphrase a recent Slate article. You see, this guy, Mayor Pete, he's one of those homosexuals that doesn't act all flamboyant. He doesn't have a purse, or, act like a woman, or have, sort of a lisp. He just kind of acts like a guy who happens to also, sleep with guys. So I guess as far as the intersectional coalition is concerned, they're not going to label him as a gay, so he can't count as the first gay president. Or first openly gay president. Obviously, we already had a gay president with James Buchanan. Another interesting point, it's not something that I've heard him touch much upon, is his status as a veteran of the war in Afghanistan. Now, frankly, the only reason I have any interest in veterans is that they're the only people really who can get away with saying anything remotely anti-war and not be labeled, America haters. Of course, you see Tulsi Gabbard, who fought in Iraq, a veteran, and still gets labeled an American hater and I believe the term was an Assad toady by Barry Weiss. But considering that this Pete fellow went to Harvard, he's probably a huge war hawk and loves the empire. So I wouldn't expect him to be calling out the wars, or at least not passionately. I can't see him being a guy getting elected and then bringing the troops home. I think that he would probably want to do his due diligence as the commander-in-chief and continue the empire on into eternity. So on that front, he would probably be a disaster, because not only would he be a war hawk, he would also be a war hawk who was a veteran, so he would have even greater credibility in starting wars and such. If I were in Trump's shoes, what I would want to be doing right now is trying to draw attention, as much attention as possible, away from this Pete fellow, and just sort of ignore him, and try and set up the dichotomy between myself and one of the other candidates in the Democratic field, like Biden or Bernie. Don't destroy them yet. You don't want to destroy them, but you want to do make them seem like your enemies so that they are viewed as heroes in the eyes of the Democratic voters. If Trump were to sort of martyr this Pete fellow, well, then he could galvanize a lot of support behind him. So what Trump wants to do is try and pick the weakest candidate possible, and then set them up as his enemies, so the people will vote for that guy in sort of a reverse psychology play. Currently, I think the two weakest candidates against Trump would be number one, Elizabeth Warren, and two, probably Kamala Harris or Cory Booker, tied for second there. Now, sadly for Trump, I think there's no chance of Elizabeth Warren becoming the nominee, because I think she's been so thoroughly discredited by Trump as it is, so he doesn't really have much chance to try and prop her up. So if you got anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and subscribing, because I do certainly upload every day, and I hope to see you all back here tomorrow.